And I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that Police Scotland's proportionate response to crime pilot, in which not all reported crimes were investigated, is to be extended across Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, at a meeting of the Scottish Police Authority last week, the Chief Constable stated that the North East pilot was about ensuring a proportionate approach to policing. Deputy Chief Constable Malcolm Graham also outlined some preliminary findings, with a full evaluation to be presented to the SPA in the near future. Any decision on whether the pilot will be extended more widely are for Police Scotland, with oversight and scrutiny provided by the SPA. Public confidence will be key to this process. Officers in the North East will continue to investigate all crimes reported. This means all reports are recorded using the Thrive model, with an assessment of threat, harm, risk and investigative opportunities, vulnerability and engagement. Police Scotland remains focused on keeping communities safe from harm.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. Now, the SNP government might not want to listen to opposition MSPs, but they should listen to Scotland's police officers. The Scottish Police Federation could not be clearer about this surrender to criminals. Its chair says this is being driven, and I quote, purely by finance and not by basic policing principles. The General Secretary reveals they were not even consulted on this policy being extended across Scotland. And he says that, quote, the public have been let down. And he's absolutely right, Presiding Officer. So will the Cabinet Secretary disclose how many crimes were not investigated in the pilot and how many more she expects will not be investigated across Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I do all members and all stakeholders the courtesy of listening to their viewpoints. It is a shame that that is not always replicated, because despite a narrative by some of misconstruing the pilot, which I think is regrettable, and I have to once again emphasise what the Chief Constable has said to the board and also to observers, that this is not a policy about non-investigation. Police Scotland have been clear that they will continue to investigate all crimes reported. Every crime is subject to an individual assessment. If there is no proportionate lines of inquiry and no risk and no threat, there will, of course, be a report filed and a crime reference number issued. And unless there is any further evidence or information, there would be no further action. But it is important to remember that the public at the end of the day want quick and proportionate responses, bearing in mind that the change and demands on our societies, change in crime and indeed the change in demands on our police force necessitates that.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. I really don't think the Scottish Police Federation are misconstruing the terms of this policy, and I'm surprised to hear the Cabinet Secretary suggesting that. The police officers and the public have absolutely no idea what crimes will not be investigated, and that's exactly what's happening, no matter how it's spun. The pilot scheme's evaluation report is also being kept secret. So will the Cabinet Secretary explain what crimes she considers minor enough to be effectively decriminalised?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is Mr Finlay who misconstrues the pilots and deliberately misconstrues my words to this Parliament. I have to be clear with him that public confidence in this pilot and the decision-making around this pilot, which is still to take place, is absolutely crucial. And that is why there is a robust evaluation process. It is anticipated, if he had perhaps listened to the commentary and the contribution of the Deputy Chief Constable at the SPA board, that this is about a proportionate response to each and every crime. We surely do not expect police officers to pursue a line of inquiry if there is indeed no line of inquiry to pursue. So it's a shame that Mr Finlay will continue to blister the importance of this matter, because this is about ensuring that we have public confidence, that we respond proportionately to each and every crime, and we work together to keep Scotland safe.
Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that this approach does seek to ensure a proportionate and appropriate response, so that where there are no lines of inquiry, information is recorded but no further action taken, therefore enabling officers to concentrate on more serious crimes where there are opportunities for detection? And does the Cabinet Secretary agree that it is important that the public are reassured that where evidence subsequently does come to light, the matter will indeed be investigated?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, to be clear, there are occasions where reported crimes have no associated threat, risk, harm or vulnerability, and also, as I've said, no proportionate lines of inquiry for police officers to investigate. Police Scotland, I repeat, have been very clear that when reported crimes do have proportionate lines of inquiry, including after crime has been reported, that they will be investigated, as has always been the case. And if I quote the Deputy Chief Constable, Malcolm Graham, when he said, if there are no lines of inquiry that can be pursued, then we shouldn't be, in some ways, be setting up an expectation that there are things that police can do when we can't. And, Presiding Officer, I note that the preliminary findings outlined by the Deputy Chief Constable Graham at the same meeting included that around 5% of calls taken by Police Scotland fell into this category.
Pauline McNeill.
It will be interesting to see if this pilot does have public confidence. And a central question is, well, who arbitrates as to whether or not it's proportionate or not? How can the Cabinet Secretary ignore the Police Federation, who also said that this policy is a dangerous precedent and we should be very, very careful? Is this, the Cabinet Secretary, the slippery slope? Because if you don't investigate these crimes, how do we know that other crimes won't continue to be investigated? And how can the Cabinet Secretary be so sure this has public confidence?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, of course, Presiding Officer, that's a very important part of the evaluation process. It will be scrutinised robustly and thoroughly by the Oversight group that the Scottish Police Authority have set up. The Chair of the Scottish Police Authority will chair that Oversight group. It will, of course, be looking at many factors, but at its core, it will indeed be public confidence. And I have to repeat, Presiding Officer, surely we cannot expect police officers to be pursuing lines of inquiry where no lines of inquiry exist. And as in my reply to Audrey Nicholl, in terms of the preliminary findings, now these are just preliminary findings and summary findings, we will all want to see the full report along with the full evaluation, but the preliminary findings say that around less than 5% of calls taken by Police Scotland fall into this category.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Former Superintendent Martin Gallagher has described Police Scotland's decision not to tackle minor crime as disastrous. This could include crimes like vandalism, break-ins or antisocial behaviour in our communities. We often hear that crime is falling, but it is estimated that 60% of crime is unreported. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, how can the Scottish Government ensure they're being tough on criminals when they're letting some away without investigation?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I think that is a very serious slur against policing in this Scotland, that they do not pursue lines of inquiry when they exist. We all have a shared endeavour, and I accept the scrutiny and the challenge, and I accept that everybody in this chamber has an interest in ensuring that our communities are safe. And Police Scotland investigate a massive range of crimes, from those that some of us may consider less serious to those crimes of the utmost seriousness. So we really do have to be looking carefully, yes, at this pilot, but we should be looking first and foremost at the facts and evidence, Presiding Officer.
Rona Mackay.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for confirming that Police Scotland has always stated, and now the Chief Constable has confirmed, officers in the North East continue to investigate all crimes reported, and the service remains focused on keeping communities safe from harm. Can the Cabinet Secretary provide an explanation of the Thrive initiative, threat, harm, risk, investigative opportunity assessments carried out on crime reports?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Thrive model isn't new. It was rolled out as part of the contact assessment model in 2021 to ensure that all callers receive an appropriate response and that incidents can be properly prioritised. Handlers consider the 6 key factors of threat, harm, risk, investigative opportunity, vulnerability and engagement on each call received. And if an immediate or prompt police response is required, the call is passed to the area control room. The most suitably located, skilled and equipped police officers will be dispatched. And if the call does not require an immediate response, it will be passed to a specialist team of officers and staff for further assessment. It is its 2022 assurance review of the contact assessment model that HMICS noted that Thrive was helping to determine the most appropriate response to incidents being reported to Police Scotland.
And Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary has referred on many occasions to the importance of public confidence. It's not clear, though, from her responses to date how that public confidence will be assessed. I wonder whether she could provide more detail on that, and indeed in the engagement that has been with victims groups who clearly have a very clear view on the effectiveness of this approach.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it is an important point, and the evaluation and the full report, it would be my expectation that that will address the issue very clearly of public confidence and indeed feedback from the communities that we all seek to represent.